was the guy who used to be a very famous Olympic diver. I forgot his name, but he was huge.
Are you referring to Mark Spitz?
No, before him, before Mark.
And on that note, if you just tuned in, you are listening to The World According to That Man, Benjamin Jeremy Stein. I want to welcome everybody in the YouTube chat. And of course, I want to thank everybody that's been downloading the podcast at exceptional speeds and giving us those really fun reviews. I love the reviews we get. They're interesting. I've read them to Ben. He was touched and honored by them. So thank you. Keep up those pithy reviews. And of course, you can get Ben's email, benstein.substack.com. We're joined tonight by regular from WIBC 93.1, the president of Conservative Talk Radio, BAM, Rob Kendall.
We love him.
With his Save Ferris shirt. It's really one of the great. That shirt, that slogan is one of the greatest of all time. And of course, that movie, what it's based on, wouldn't be a movie without iconoclast.
No, not iconoclast. An iconoclast is what you are. You break down icons. I am an icon.
You broke down many icons.
You bet.
So you're an iconoclast, and
that's very good. That's extremely good. That's very good. I like.
Thank you, and of course, writer, actor, provocateur, saint, sinner, mathematician, statistician, economist, but of course, mostly Dr. Benjamin Jeremy Stein. We salute you.
I am glad to be here. And by the way, I don't take any insurance. I don't take any fees. I don't take any patients.
I would disagree with that sometimes. I think you've taken in a few patients. But on that note, I want to get right to something. Tonight I want to use and dig into the brain of Ben Stein. And I'm glad Rob is here, and I'm glad we're in a smallish crowd because Rob likes asking questions too. But one of the stories today, and that came out
there in the east wing of the estate. Sorry.
One of the stories that came out today, and it didn't come out in America, but it came out in the UK Daily Mail, was messages off Hunter Biden's laptop, and where he it was talking to his white lawyer using the N-word quite a few times. And then there's a meme in it where he refers to Obama in a racial way.
I'm an old man. What is a meme?
It's like this little like picture where you like fill in like words to it. And either way, and we now know, Ben, the point is that it came from the Daily Mail.
Right, I get it. Nobody in America had the guts to say anything even slightly negative about the royal family of the Bidens.
Right. So obviously they didn't do any investigation before the election when they found this laptop. Obviously there was, and my question to you is, what are journalists doing if they're not investigating?
What are they congratulating each other on having overthrown the fascist regime of the pig power structure, Donald Trump, and moving on with a glorious America, which is on a freight car track heading crashing into national bankruptcy and heading crashing into the loss of the constitutional protections of free speech and free association, and heading straight into our being a lackey of communist China. And then,
but Ben, more to the point, when you worked Ben, more to the point, when you worked for the Federal Trade Commission,
yes,
you had to clock in, you had to fill out reports for airline, for airline tickets.
Oh yeah, yes I did. How did you know that?
Well, you told me.
Oh, okay.
But my point being is, my question is, Ben, when these journalists go into work,
it's funny.
What notes are they giving? What sources are they paying if they're not? I mean, like, what is going on?
I think they put in chasing down fascist oppression before it starts. I don't know what they do. I'll tell you a funny story. This is one of my favorite stories. During the Nixon days, those great days, long gone, some reporters were sitting around in the press room, and one said to another one, "What's the hardest question you could ask Mr. Nixon?" And the other one said, "Mr. President, what do you do all day?" And the other one said, "That's too hard." And I think we might flip it around and say to the journalists, what do you do all day? And I guess the answer is they travel, they give speeches, and they get paid for it. I've done it myself. It's great. They appear on talk shows. It's great. They go to parties and I suppose pick up girls, and who knows what they do with them. I don't want to make any hasty assumptions, but they just party hardy is the phrase that comes to mind.
So, Rob, I'll ask you the same question, and then I want to move on to our main topic.
So first of all, I've used many memes of Ben over the years. So Ben, I don't know if you know, but there are many memes of you, and they come in handy quite a bit. They're very wonderful.
Well, God bless you, sir. God bless you, sir.
I think it's interesting that the mainstream media is completely in the tank for the Biden administration, to the point, it's not that they do it. It's not that they've long been left, as Ben can date back to the days of Nixon, but they're completely in the tank.
Way before Nixon.
They are completely in the tank, and they don't even hide it anymore, to the point of, if Donald Trump Jr. had done what Hunter Biden has done, he would be run out of the country. Forget canceled. He'd run out of the country.
He'd be put in prison. Yeah, he would be put in prison, executed, and then his body would be burned and then scattered over the South Pole. Now you have to be a liberal Democrat, part of the ruling posse of America, in order to get away with what they get away with. You have to be.
So I want to bring up an interesting thing. A friend of mine brought this up to me today, and I know Ben was in the car, and we started talking, and I said to him, basically what a friend of mine said to me today was, the last time Jack Ma, who's basically like the Bezos of China, was in a video about 3 months ago, and Ben said, I don't really care about the guy in China, but this guy is worth noting is the Jeff Bezos, is the Bill Gates of China. And it looked like one of those engineered videos. And then my friend said, what about Kim Jong-un? And he brought up that we haven't heard anything from this guy. And this goes to and my friend's asking me this, Ben, and getting back to it, why are journalists not asking, where are these people? Where is Kim Jong-un, a person that has a nuclear arsenal?
Yeah, I don't. It's a very, very good question. Very, very good question. What's happened to him? What's happened to the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party? I mean, they used to be all around the country whipping up the masses to fulfill and overfulfill the United States' production of this or that. But they seem to have vanished too. And I don't know but your question is basically, is there such a thing as journalism anymore? I very seriously doubt it. I mean, they have now accomplished their mission. They have demolished the conservative movement as a possible occupier of the White House, at least for a while, and perhaps forever. And they don't have anything much to do. I mean, I was just in Washington. We have a home in Washington, by no means an estate. We have a small home in Washington, and it's incredibly quiet in Washington. My wonderful driver, Bob, was saying he's been driving around in Washington forever, like for decades. He's never seen the streets as quiet as they are now, even during a sunny, clear day. There's just nobody on the street. There's nobody anywhere. I don't know. It's like the whole country has gone into hiding.
That's a great point, and Rob, but it really leads to question, like, every time I've spoken to people and I've told this story about the civil unrest in France, and
why don't you tell it again, because it's a really good story.
In France, supposedly there was a wannabe attempted coup, which I believe happened 60 years ago, and where 50 retired generals and about 24, you could Google this, and sort of about 24,000 or 2,400 soldiers, active, Rob, were calling for, saying they were going to overthrow the government. And you can't find that story anywhere. And I've told people this story and they look at me like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, Google it. And if you Google it, it's the first thing that comes up. But my point, the greater point being that I raised the other night is there are no stories. We are not getting any news. I have never, there is like a total news shutdown, Rob. It's one of the most fascinating things I've ever seen in my life.
We got into this today on the air, and we talked about it quite a bit, but it came back up again about how news media there are very few actual journalists left. News media is now, by and large, agenda shaping. And everybody has an opinion on things, and they've always had an opinion on things. But once upon a time, it seemed like there were a lot of people who were at least decent at pretending to put those opinions aside to find the truth. And you don't really have that anymore. There is actually a TV anchor in Arizona who became so disenchanted with how the news media was manipulating that she resigned, and now she's running for governor. I forget her name. I think it was a big story today, but she's running on the Republican side for governor. And part of what she's doing in running for governor is exposing how media manipulates the news to manipulate you.
Well, and it's working incredibly well. I have a very smart friend who refers to people as sheeple. I think that's a phrase that the late gentleman who recently passed away in Florida used to use. Somehow we have just been neutered as a group of human beings and sedated. It's as if the whole country were being given a steady diet of Quaaludes. And there is something very strange going on, and yet there is wild prosperity in many places, but it doesn't seem to translate into activity or any kind of active motion. I recently came back. I told you I was in Washington. I came back a couple of nights ago, and at the airport at LAX is just mobbed, insanely mobbed, with people getting off the plane, trying to find a taxi, trying to find Uber, trying to find their cars and drivers, trying to find their sisters or cousins. And yet, then once you leave, when you go a couple of blocks from the airport, it's dead again. It's dead. You might as well be in one of the towns in an early Clint Eastwood movie with sagebrush blowing down the main street. There's nothing happening. It's very, very quiet indeed. And then you see stories on the front page of the Wall Street Journal about how there are these giant $1 trillion deals going on, $1 trillion government efforts. Even so, nothing seems to be going on. I mean, it's the media has just clamped down and told Americans, it's all right now. Hush, little baby, don't you cry, and just go to sleep now. And when you wake up, everything will be peaches and apple pie.
Hey, Ben, can I ask you a question?
Of course.
Why do you think it is that so many journalists are left? I mean, that must have started somewhere. Obviously, it's grown over time. But why did it start? How did it start? Because the truth shouldn't have an ideology, right?
I bet it does. The truth. There's never been a truth that didn't have an ideology. There is no such thing as truth. Oh boy, did you ask the right cowboy for this? There is something called the Bible, the New Testament, and at one point the Lord Jesus Christ is brought before Pontius Pilate, and Pontius Pilate says something like, you say that you're the king of the Jews. Are you really king of the Jews? And Jesus does not answer. And Pontius Pilate says, well, come on, tell the truth. And Jesus does not answer. And Pontius Pilate says, he should have holds his hands and says, what is truth? And walks away. And as if to say, truth doesn't mean anything anyway. Truth is just an artificial concept. Truth in America today is just whatever the media says it is. And if it happens to be nothing that day, then it's nothing that day. We're living in a whole different America from the America we lived in a year ago. We're living in an America where everybody is drugged and soperized, to use a word that doesn't exist, but a meaning under the influence of sopers, which is a kind of sleeping pill. It's a different America from what we knew and grew up with. We're in an America that has been sedated. It's been decided by the powers that be that an awake America is too dangerous. We better put America to sleep.
You have a follow-up, Rob? Or did that
No,
answer it?
well, it did. I just wonder, like, at some point, like, where do they learn it? Or when did the journalism schools say this is the way we're going to be? I mean, has it always been that way? I mean, there had to be a point where it started going down that path.
Well, I think it started going down that path in the Great Depression when there was just extreme discouragement and fear about the future of America under the capitalist system. And the communists who had been running a large part of American institutions for a long time, American academic institutions, not a majority, but a good sized part of it, said, okay, we've got the answer. And the answer is state control of everything and no more of this nonsense about individual rights and individual activity, individual initiative and momentum. And it's all going to be from now on about the state control of everything. And that's what it has now turned out to be. And it's gotten worse and worse and worse. And the left has been incredibly adroit about picking up various things and making them seem as if they're terribly important, like John McCarthy, who really, I mean, I know I'm going to get a lot of hate mail about this, but McCarthy really was not that bad a guy and made a lot of very good points about the problems with American government. He was demonized as being a lackey of Satan. Then the Watergate came along. That was absolutely nothing happened at Watergate. The whole idea that it was a big thing was just made up. It was a big thing to the journalists, otherwise not a big thing. The Vietnam War, that really was a catastrophically bad mistake. And but the government actually never mentioned the fact that was started by the Democrats. It wasn't started by Nixon. It wasn't started by Gerald Ford. It was started by the Democrats, ended by Republicans. So any issue that could be picked up and seized upon by the left was picked up and seized upon them because their goal was always to take power. They never took their eyes off the ball. They always had their eyes on the main chance, and the main chance was we can use any scandal that happens as a lever, as a stepping stone to make power and to take power.
And on that note, if you just tuned in, you are listening to The World According to That Man, who is a treasure trove of information that needs to be shared. And I want to thank everybody that's in the chat. I want to remind everybody to please download the podcast. Even if you are in the chat, it is extremely helpful. Download it. And of course, find Ben at benstein.substack.com, our emails for everything that's going on in the world according to Ben Stein. And we're joined tonight by the president of Conservative Talk Radio from 93.1 BAM, WIBC. And of course, America's humble servant, Benjamin Jeremy Stein. So as we're talking about this, Rob, and as we're moving along in the conversation, Ben and I, the conversation comes to Islam, and because we started talking about France, and I just want to read the title of a piece a brilliant piece that's written. It's called "Jihad is the Nazism of the 21st Century." And it's a really brilliant piece about what's going on in Africa. And I go again to the journalists that are uncovering these stories. There are thousands of people in Africa that are Christians or whatever by the Islamists. They're just being slaughtered, and nobody is reporting these stories. And this is obviously more than the word they love to use under Trump, an obvious existential threat. But how did we allow this to happen in countries where, first, we were talking about Germany, we were talking about France, we were talking about Belgium, we were talking about most of Europe, which in 20 years, Ben Stein, will cease to look like Europe. How the hell did this happen?
Well, because when the colonial empires were broken up, and part of the deal made with the inhabitants of the former colonies was that they, or a large part of them, could move to the home country, France or England or whatever it was, Italy, and live there and enjoy all the benefits of prosperous Western European life. And they did that in large numbers. They had big families. They didn't mind kicking the kids around or cuffing them in order to keep order in the household. It was not like American Jewish families where the kids basically tyrannized over the parents. The kids could be kept in line and the parents could keep them in line. And so the families got to be quite large, and the children voted. They had children, they voted. And suddenly cities that were only a tiny amount of Muslim population became a majority Muslim, or at least so much Muslim that the Muslims were an indispensable ingredient in any political campaign. And this is especially true in Brussels, Belgium, in which no candidate can possibly be elected to the city council or to the mayoralty of Brussels unless he or she, I guess it has to be he, is approved by the Muslims. Same in France. Everybody has to be approved by the Muslims before they can go anywhere. Britain, not entirely so, but there's still a hell of a lot of Muslims in Britain, and they are a powerful, incredibly powerful political group, and they cannot and will not be denied. And you may say, oh, surely Britain, which is sort of a poster child for Colonel Blimp style condescension towards the colonies and the colonized, that surely cannot be the next in line to fall, but it is. It's going to be the same thing. There, a very brave young woman that made a video, which is circulating like mad on the internet, of the astounding amount of anti-Semitism in London now against British Jews because of the Israeli defense of itself against missile attacks from Gaza. And so even England can become a fertile area for anti-Semitism. And that's a very scary story. If you think it's going to stay over there, you're very much mistaken. It's so funny. It's funny, haha. I was talking to an extremely close relative this afternoon, about a wonderful, wonderful human being, very, very close relative, who was telling me that she was going to be and is contributing to Black Lives Matter. And I was so speechless I could hardly speak. And I thought to myself, well, you are digging your grave for your children and your grandchildren and your great grandchildren. But if that's what you want to do, I can't stop you. But this is the end of America when we allow groups like Black Lives Matter to be extremely powerful in political and cultural life. That's the end of America because they are anti-freedom, anti-law and order, anti-peace. They're not pro anything useful.
Rob?
And I was thinking it was interesting that because we just obviously celebrated, or everybody but Biden celebrated the anniversary of D-Day and that horrific.
Biden hardly knew what happened.
He didn't. He didn't acknowledge it. And we celebrate what is arguably the most selfless act in recorded human history. And I was thinking about this as I was watching, the tributes come in. Could we even build a coalition of the willing today if it necessitated it on the side of liberty and freedom? And it's really scary to think, one, that I don't think we could. I don't think we could garner enough political will across the globe for that sort of coalition. And two, I'm not sure America right now, given the makeup of our government, would lead it. I'm not sure America would either. I mean, I think a lot of Americans would say it's their right to choose if they want to be run by the Nazis. Go for it. And anyway, the Jews have been running things and stirring the pot for long enough. Let's have somebody teach them a lesson. I mean, we're seeing this right now. Jews are always the canary in the coal mine. When people start going after them and wanting to annihilate the Jews and wanting to put the Jews back in their cages, that's always just the beginning of wanting to kill freedom and dignity of the freedom and dignity of the individual altogether. It doesn't happen in isolation. It happens because it is part of a larger, gigantic movement against human freedom. And that's what's happening in large measure in the world. Unfortunately, it's happening in very large measure in the United States of America. When I was talking to this very dear relative about Black Lives Matter, I said to her, what do you think they're doing with the money that you're giving them? What good do you think they're doing? She said, we probably shouldn't discuss it because you and I have very different attitudes about Black people. I said, I didn't say this to her, but I said to my wifey, who was sitting next to me in the car, big wifey, you and I were out demonstrating for the Black Panther Party. She was shopping at Bergdorf Goodman. When you and I were marching and laying down in front of cars to get Black people the right to vote, she was shopping at, I don't know, Tiffany or Cartier or somewhere like that. So I don't get it, but let us just say, if Black Lives Matter is doing anything useful for anyone but themselves,
for the author people who created it and are now looting it to build and buy big houses for themselves, it's invisible to me.
Can I piggyback off that for a second? Because
you don't have to ask, Rob. Just go.
Well, I
He's a very polite young man, and God bless him.
He is.
Two things. One, and I guess maybe we can go here first with this. When did we look? I love doing this show because I learn so much from Ben. I learn about history. I learn about life. I've loved history from the time I was a little kid, and it doesn't seem that people are inquisitive about history anymore. They don't care. They don't want to understand what's come before them. And it's a scary thing that people don't seem to give a damn at all about how they got here.
They don't. I mean, wifey and I were talking this afternoon as we were looking out at the waves, and I said, it's interesting. Long ago, 52, 53 years ago, you and I were working diligently, staying up late at night. We're doing fundraisers for the Black Panther Party, which we were told by people with very sincere looks on their faces, was raising money for the so-called Hill Free Breakfast Program. The Hill was a predominantly Black neighborhood in New Haven, Connecticut. And supposedly, and perhaps it's true, probably was true, many of the children there had split homes, divorced parents, fathers or mothers often in prison. Kids woke up, had nothing to eat for breakfast, nobody to make breakfast for them, went off to school hungry and dissatisfied, and were unable to concentrate because they were hungry. We raised money. I mean, we could have given each kid a frigging ham for breakfast. We raised so much money for them. And later turned out that the whole thing they were all drug dealers and murderers, and many of them went to prison. We felt like we were chumps, but that was just the ethos of the era. Now it's Black Lives Matter. What's happening? What are they doing for Black people to protect them from being murdered? They're building and buying huge houses for the founders. That's it. There's no evidence that they're doing anything constructive to help Black people have better lives. Even the person who told me she was now a contributor to this horror show said, I don't approve they're using the money to launch programs to defund the police. What good can that possibly conceivably do? What good can it do?
And the city that she's from, Rob, sorry, a 10-year-old Black child, that Brady said, was killed in New York today. And of course, they're silent, not by cops, but by stray bullets across the street. And it's really akin, this organization, to other terrorist organizations in the past. And they are a terrorist organization. Let's be realistic. I'm sorry if you're a family member that's supporting a terrorist organization, but terrorist organizations never, obviously it's okay to kill with impunity, or it's okay when others get killed with impunity, but they always take a stand. We're sort of like the Associated Press building in Israel, Ben. Not in Israel, but in Gaza.
Which really was part of Israel until Israel gave it back to the Palestinians and said, "Look, we fixed it all up for you. It's got the latest in hydroponic agriculture. Go to town." And the Palestinians just smashed and destroyed it and went back to living hand to mouth. So anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rob.
Well, I was just going to say, Ben touched on the other point, and we talked about this a lot recently, which is the grift, right? Where does the money go? We know Patrisse Cullors had 3 homes, the head of BLM.
I think he has 4 now.
Yeah. We know that a whole bunch of this money is going to Democrat and Democrat-related causes, but you can't point too much of anything on how Black Lives Matter has actually helped the lives of Black people, which is why.
It hasn't at all. Of course, it's a total grift. The whole thing is a grift. I mean, the whole damn thing is a grift. The whole liberal left-wing movement in America today is a gigantic grift.
And they learned it from the greatest.
The poster child for grifting 2021, just funneling money to himself. And why does he get it? Because his father is president. His father is supposedly a progressive. What are you talking about? I can remember very well when those of us who are opposed to school busing could count him as one of our most stalwart supporters.
Sorry, Rob, for interrupting you.
Sorry, Rob. Sorry.
No, you're fine. It's just I don't and look, I struggle with this, and it's one of the things that I've tried to get better at is understanding how other people view the world, even if I don't agree with it. But when it's so blatantly obvious, and as Ben said, when he presses this family member on it, they can't explain it to him. They just say, "Oh, we're not going to agree on this, and I don't want to get into it with you." Is white guilt that strong to continue to feel a need to give money to people who there's no evidence they're doing anything to help the people that you claim to want to help? Like, is white guilt that strong?
And why should people like the woman in question, who's a fine human being, why should Judah, why should you feel any white guilt at all? What have you done to hurt these people? I mean, I don't get it. I mean, nobody in my family owned a plantation. Nobody in my family owned slaves. Actually, in my wife's family, they're long time Southerners. Probably some of her ancestors did own slaves. I don't say they did. It's possible. My wife's a saint, a living, breathing saint, the absolutely best person God ever made. She's never done any harm to anyone in her life. What do we owe this guilt? What's this guilt all about? Where does it come from? I don't get it. I mean, when I was born on November 25th, 1944. There was a lot of repression of Black people, a hell of a lot. And it's shameful and it's disgraceful and it's humiliating as hell and awful. Since 65, there has been a revolution in terms of the rights of Black people. There's never been anything like it in any other country ever. Are we grateful about it? Are we happy about it? No, we say it's even worse. It's even more systemic. Racism is even more systemic than it was before. We've gone crazy.
And you're completely right. And the point,
gaslit by the media.
And it's the people that should feel guilty are the ones that never do. That's the ironic thing about it, being the president, being the leader of this country. I hate calling him president. Mr. Biden has done more again to hurt the Black community. If anybody should have white guilt, it's this person, but narcissists and racists or never have no self-awareness, and nobody calls them out on it. And the media is obviously complicit in this racism because they're the ones that are constantly pushing this racist message.
Yeah, and if I may say so, the media was also a big part of the racism in the United States of America. I grew up watching TV and listening to radio on CBS radio. CBS, mind you, CBS, big giant network. They used to have a show on, I think it was around 6:30 in the evening, called Amos and Andy, about Black.
It's banned now.
I don't know, believe me, I think it's banned. It was such cruel, vicious mockery of Black people. It was unbelievable. The people at CBS are not paying any reparations about that. Maybe they should be. I like CBS. I was on as a columnist for them for a long time. I like them a lot. I'd like to see them pay some reparations. For decades, there are no Black people on television to speak of, except for people who are washing cars or shining shoes. I'd like to see some reparations about that. Is that happening? Well, no, there are an awful lot of Black people on television right now. But the whole idea that right now in America, there is systemic racism is just crazy. And even if there were, what is Black Lives Matter doing about it? What are they doing about it?
Ben mentions Amos and Andy and how offensive it was, but one of my best friends in the whole world, his name is Abdul Hakim Shabazz. He has a really cool website. It's called indiepolitics.org. He reports on all things related to Indiana politics and government. He's Black. He loves that show. He thought it was great. And so we talk about that all the time. He's like, I wish that show was on TV still. My dad used to watch it, when I was a kid, and we loved it and we laughed at it. So it's like, who are the deciders about this, about what is and is not offensive?
Very, very, very good point. Very, very, very good point. And while we're on that subject, you and I and our friend Judah are not allowed to use the N-word. If we use the N-word on TV, we get in terrible trouble. Black people use it all the time. It's standard. It's basic. Why? Why is that? If it's that offensive, why are they allowed to say it?
And how does poor like Ellie Kemper get almost canceled for going to some pageant who was on the Office for years, 20 some years ago, and she has to write a written apology, and yet they've got Hunter Biden saying this stuff in text message, and as Judah said earlier, you got to look really hard to find it getting reported.
Getting no punishment, not even getting reported. And by the way, when we decided as a nation that you are no longer allowed to use the N-word, that was the end of free speech. That's the end of free speech. You can call me a kike. Yes, you're allowed to do that. You can call somebody else a Pollock. Yes, you're allowed to do that. You cannot call a black person the N-word, even though it's on the comedy networks all night long. Black comedians calling other black people the N-word.
And in every rap song.
And in every rap song. Absolutely.
By the way, you bring up Ellie Kemper, and I just want to say something. I like her as an actress, and I like her, but the fact when she released that message today apologizing, I lost all respect for her. Just you had nothing to apologize for, and that's like a really training video that somebody needs to start getting out there. Is there is no apologies for once you've been canceled these days. There's no compassion. People that want to cancel you or people that want or kill you are not compassionate people. So no matter what you say, that's always going to be the first 3 pages of your Google search. So Ellie Kemper, who comes from a lot of money, probably, who's made a ton of money acting, should just say nothing. I didn't do anything wrong. Plain and simple. She would have a bigger, and Ben, that's the thing I think people don't understand sometimes. If you don't capitulate, your audience grows. It might not be the cool kids in the room, but you look at President Trump, 75 million people at least loved this uncouth or whatever, however people want to say, the guy that supposedly said the N-word on the Apprentice tapes that nobody was ever able to find. And we know every journalist was probably working on that story, Ben Stein.
Well, we know every journalist was working because what they describe as work is not necessarily the same as what you and I describe as work. But we know there's a double standard, and there's a standard in which things that are not wrong are wrong if they say they're wrong. They're right if they say they're right. I beg you, those of you who have not read 1984, I beg you, go to Amazon, go to your local library if you have libraries nowadays, get the book 1984. It is America right now. There is a power structure that instructs you down to the last detail on what you can say and what you can do, and it is a terrifyingly comprehensive, thorough guide to what America has become. It is really blood-curdling.
And Judah, to piggyback off what you said and what Ben said, we talked about Ellie Kemper a lot on the air today. She goes from being a victim who you go, man, I feel bad for her, to, as you kind of just said, now you're a part of the problem because people keep giving in to this ridiculous mob that is just out for blood. And as long as you keep feeding them, just like Chris Harrison when he was on The host of The Bachelor, you make it stronger and continue to allow it to grow.
Yeah, you make it stronger, and what you do. So when you make it stronger, what happens? You get these people get to be run it, get to be richer. People who are ass licking Black Lives Matter get higher positions. What good does it do for the ordinary black kid who wakes up at home with no father? Mother is probably passed out, or might be, or maybe she's hard at work somewhere. What good does it do for people who really need help? What is anybody?
Well, it goes, Ben. You bring up a great point, and in Europe, in London, there's a famous guy. His name is Bob Geldof. Okay, Sir Bob Geldof, and he did the original Live Aid, and he did the next Live Aid, which was called Live Aid, and it was first Live Aid. And people there were like, at the second one, they were like, the money that you're raising for Africa is never going to the Africans. It's going to when you raise this money and you give it to the African government, does it ever go to the people? And it's sort of like this sort of crazy sort of guilt. But if you're going to give Ben, and you could Google charities. That's the great thing about online is they have like ratings for charities and how much people get from those charities, where the money is doled out to. If you're a 501c3, you really, and it's fascinating, like the Clinton Foundation. Sorry, so if I'm not watching you, you're going to eat?
Go ahead.
I'll shut the video.
Go ahead.
But if Ben, it's sort of like if you're a 501c, you know who to give to, and that's Go ahead, since you're.
Maybe this is a good idea. Maybe we shouldn't be giving to any of these people, and maybe we should be saying to people, look, if you want to get ahead in life, go to school, work hard, get a job, be like the Vietnamese, be like the Koreans, be like the Chinese, be like the Arabs. Why do we take one group of immigrants to America and say, we think you're too pitiful to do it by yourselves. We're going to have to do every step of it for you. I don't think Black people are that pitiful. I work with Black people every day. They're capable, they're hardworking, they're disciplined. Why do we assume that we need to take them by the hand and lead them everywhere and give them their allowance? Otherwise, they can't make a living and can't feed themselves. Let's give them some credit. After the Civil War, they were in pathetic shape. They had been slaves. They hadn't been allowed to learn to read or write. They hadn't been allowed to learn to do sums. Somehow they managed to build farms, to build businesses, to build a life, to build families. It was only when Whitey came along and said, oh, you're not doing it right. We'll show you how to do it. And suddenly, bam, the whole thing disintegrated. And all the Black people, not all, a lot of them just became wards of Whitey. Maybe we should just try saying to the Black people, we'll let you try to do it by yourselves. You're Americans. You're just as American as Jeff Bezos. You're just as American as whatever Hollywood billionaire is giving you a check. Maybe you can do it for yourself.
Rob?
One of the great things about America, maybe the greatest thing about America, is that a infrastructure was put in place, and it took a while to get there, but people were willing to fight and die for it, and many people did, to create an environment by which anybody can be anything at any given time.
Right.
Where else in the world can you say that? It's incredible.
Exactly right, and nobody gives us credit for that. And people act as if we have somehow oppressed people by giving them freedom. We're not oppressing people by giving them freedom. We're giving them every opportunity to make a great life for themselves. And by the way, what's a great life? A great life, I can tell you, having had an awful lot of material things in my life, a great life is not having a tremendous number of material things. It's nice. I agree. It's totally nice. A great life is having a wifey whom you love and are devoted to. A great life is having parents you love and are devoted to. A great life is having children you love and are devoted to, having friends that you love and are devoted to, having a God that you love and worship, forgiving, learning to forgive. Last night, if I may make this selfish observation about my fat old self, I was lying in my bed and I was thinking about someone who had really made me furious earlier in the day. And not you. And I was thinking, I have all kinds of ways that I could really get back at this person. But then I thought, you know what? The person who can forgive is walking in the footsteps of God. So I decided, I'll just forgive this person. That's it. And suddenly a burden was lifted from me. Maybe that's a way to enrich people, is teaching them to have some kind of spirituality in their lives.
I think you raise a great point, Ben. You raise a brilliant point, and that's what's missing in our country is spirituality and God. I mean, it's sort of the most obvious thing we could see. But the problem with that is we can't be choir boys in fighting the people, the elks of the BLM movement and the jihadists. We can't be, I wish that was the proper message, turn the cheek, but look what turning the cheek has done for us. Look what it's done for us as a party. Look what it's done to the country by us turning the cheek, by saying this too shall pass. It's just a phase. We thought that 5 years ago with BLM, under Obama. everybody thought in their right minds as they were screaming pigs in a blanket and all that, and all that stuff, Ben Stein, that it would just go away, that it was just, who would, I bet you, if I could bet, that just like Scientology, Ben, that when they created this, they never thought it would last. They thought it was a joke. They thought, like, how far could we take this joke? And one day, Ben Stein, that joke took off.
I agree. Okay, Judah, and I say to you with a full heart, do what you think best. Republican Party, do what you think best. Senators in the Republican Party, do what you think best. People are running for president in the Republican Party, do what you think best. For my part, I am going to try to do what I have learned from my wifey, the world's most preeminently noble and spiritual and saintly human being, which is to forgive. And I have my nice little house here in Malibu. I have a piece of something incredibly delicious called Pepperidge Farm toast. And I was allowed, when Jude isn't looking, I'm allowed to take a bite of it.
But you're referring, Ben, to personal relationships. You're not referring to a terrorist organization.
I am referring to the fact that in my day-by-day life, I find that forgiveness and trying to let these things go is a very, very strong tool for mental health and well-being. On that being done, once the bill is passed on to you and you see a bill in which you're seeing a huge amount of taxpayer money being thrown out the door for people who are gangsters and criminals and extortionists, vote no.
I don't exactly know how to respond to that, but I think in interpersonal relationships, you're completely right. Forgiveness, God, love. The problem is these are dangerous organizations. They bring they're an existential threat to our country right now, Ben Stein. The Black Lives Matter movement is extremely dangerous. They are extremely powerful. The cancel culture is extremely dangerous, Rob. Extremely, extremely. And I wish you could pray them away.
I'm not saying you can pray them away. I'm saying in my little brain, in this little skull here, that's where it is. It's in this little skull here. I can make more progress towards making a better world by using as much of that space for forgiveness as possible. If you then want to go on and ask my opinion about what Black Lives Matter is, I'll say they're the scum of the earth, without question. There's no doubt in my mind about that. But let's, in the meantime, in our daily lives, use forgiveness, love, turning the other cheek as much as possible.
As somebody brought up, Rob, Ben, just somebody brought up, the term turning the cheek has been sort of bastardized to not mean what it actually, what some would say, not actually means what it means, Rob. Doesn't come from the testament that I follow, but it's beautiful in concept, but look at what happened to the person that said turn the cheek.
Well, what happened to him was what was destined to happen to him all along. It was his destiny was created by his father, the Lord God Jehovah. There was no avoiding that destiny. That was his destiny to die in agony on the cross, and that was his destiny, and then to be elevated to heaven and sit on the right side of God. So that was his destiny. But that does not mean for a minute that we should not try to emulate his behavior in all of our interpersonal relationships. And I think, Judah, you have made a very, very sharp and intelligent point. Yes, that's true in our personal relationships. In terms of our behavior as public citizens or as politicians or as commentators on our show, yes, we should try to tell the truth, which is we are besieged by gangsters and thugs and extortionists and liars, and we should stand up to them, but we should also be as compassionate and loving as possible. I mean, that is the two are not impossible to do.
I have to, Rob. I very few times I have to totally humbly disagree, and we're allowed. We disagree sometimes, Rob. I disagree with that because I don't think you could fight somebody with love that has no compassion, that has no empathy.
I'm not saying you should fight them with love. I'm saying in your own personal life, as you are armoring yourself to go out and do battle with the world, your strongest armor is love and forgiveness. After that, if you want to take out the gun, go ahead. But in terms of behaving the right way towards people around you, armor yourself with the armor of what was preached in the Sermon on the Mount.
I think one of the things that is most alarming, because Judah made an interesting point, which was a lot of people thought the BLM thing would wear out pretty quick. Because if you think about, in a lot of ways, the precursor was Occupy Wall Street, right? Remember, there was a while where Occupy Wall Street was this thing, and oh my gosh, they're revolutionary and blah, blah, blah. And then people looked at it and they were like, this is ridiculous, and America is great, and it's not because of people like you. Get out of here. I mean, it took a while, but it wore out. And I think the alarming thing to me is, despite all the destruction and chaos, and they not just they want to change America, they want to tear America down and rebuild a new America, a different America.
Rob, they don't do that. They just want to be other rich people. They want to just be rich people in the current society.
Well, I think there's a huge faction of those people that hate this country.
They hate this. Sir, my dear friend, I'm trying. So my wife is pretty much the only person I talk to all day, so I'm used to calling everybody honey. Honey, yes, they hate America. I'm surrounded in Hollywood, and have been since I moved out here on June 30th, 1976, by people with very, very large incomes who hate America. They don't want to live in a shack. They don't want to live in an army tent somewhere on a frontier fighting against the Cossacks. They want to live lives of extraordinary luxury and pretend to be revolutionaries and pretend to be building a new world and pretend to be on the margin of the absolutely greatest changes ever happened to mankind. But look, people are people. People are human. They're greedy. They're aggressive. They want to show off. They want to have as much sex as possible. They want to eat as much as possible. Their people are just people. They are human beings. They have every kind of failing imaginable. That's what it means to be a human being. But one of those failings is vanity. So they want to be rich. They want to live in a big, fancy house, much, 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 much bigger than the house I'm talking to you from, and in a much, much better location. But they also want to fancy that they're revolutionaries. That's one of their great things. I mean, when I first moved out to Hollywood, I had the great, great, great privilege and pleasure of working for Norman Lear, a wonderful man and fabulously successful man, and a TV producer, hugely successful. And all around him were other hugely successful people in Hollywood who all wanted to pretend that they were revolutionaries and radicals while living in, even then, $5 or $10 million houses, what are probably now $30 or $40 million houses, and being driven around in Rollses and Bentleys. That's what people are. People like to pretend to be revolutionaries, and also they like to dress in mink and pearls and diamonds.
Not I. And I want to bring up the point.
Men don't usually dress in mink and pearls.
I want to bring up to somebody that said that BLM's approval rating has dropped to 40%. That's still an extremely high number of people in America that have a high approval rating of a terrorist grifter organization whose roots are steeped in.
It does nothing good.
Whose roots are steeped in Islam, Marxism, socialism, every ism that's bad. BLM is pretty much used their manifesto to build on. And I got to be honest, the question I would have asked that family member is, which BLM, or that person that you like, is which BLM did they give to? Is there like a big BLM, or is there like a New York charter?
Like a big BM. I don't know, Judah. I had a very, very quickly in the conversation that I said to this woman, there's no point in discussing this. We're never going to agree, and we might as well just move on to the next subject. And we did.
I'm just curious, by the way, of Rob, sorry, but who you give to.
Well, Ben, I was just going to follow up with you about this last point, because I think what you said is interesting. In a lot of these places where these radical groups have taken over, whether it's Portland or Seattle with the Chaz Chop, or what we saw in parts of Minnesota after the George Floyd stuff, it ended up being these really terrible, awful places, in which there was immense violence, there was squalor, et cetera. Do you think these people who were a part of this were then surprised at how it ended up.
No, I don't know, and I don't think they gave a damn, because I think what they were thinking was, right now, when I sign my name at the bottom of this check, I'm going to feel like I have just thrown a bomb at the czar's carriage. And that's how I'm going to feel. I mean, they're going to feel like they've done a revolutionary act, and they're going to feel very good about themselves. And that's all they care about.
So that person that donated today, that I know infuriated you and you had to not talk about it, was donating at the same time to the Black Panther movement, right?
No. Your humble servant, this old man, me. I'm the one who used to do.
I figured she might too.
Fundraising for the Black Panthers.
I figured she might have done that at the same time.
Are you kidding me? They didn't know her ass from her elbow about the Black Panther Party. No. As I said, she was shopping at Bergdorf Goodman. And your audience, our audience probably doesn't know what that is. It's an extremely expensive store in New York.
Well, that's my mistake. I would have figured if she was supporting BLM,
I believe absolutely not. No. I was the radical. I was the revolutionary, and I still am. I am the revolutionary and the radical because I stand up for what I believe is right, even though it's cost me a hell of a lot.
Yeah, that's completely true, Rob. And somebody brought up in Rob to the point where this isn't about when people are threatening to kill people's careers, when people are threatening people's lives and livelihoods, I don't have to have forgiveness for those people. I just don't. And I need to out loud for my person, say it out loud, but I'm not God. God's about, God's forgiveness. But on this earth, I have to fight those people tooth and nail and call them out when I see it. It's not my job to forgive those people. At night, I go to bed feeling perfectly fine. I'm not going to bed thinking about those people. But Rob, it's God's job. It's not Judah's job. That's just my humble opinion.
Well, look, America is the greatest idea ever conceived by man. And many, many people have given everything, whether it be financially, professionally, their lives in many cases, to make it that way. And part of why America is so great is the idea of freedom of expression, of the freedom to have beliefs that you want. And we are rapidly seeing that being eviscerated in this society, especially from people who are harmless. They aren't actually racist. They aren't bigots. They aren't homophobes. They're good people. And yet because they don't have the right political leaning, or they went to some ball when they were 19 years old, that they're just being, until they kowtow, until they give in and say, you're right, I'm a terrible person, they're being eviscerated, and it's terrible, and you have an obligation to speak out against that.
You have an obligation to speak out against it. I agree. No doubt about it. Absolutely no doubt about it. But I think you also have an obligation to forgive them. I think you have an obligation to forgive. I don't say forget. I say forgive. Representative Lewis, who recently passed away, who was badly beaten by the police during a demonstration in the civil rights era, never really fully recovered, said in this documentary I watched about one of the most interesting people of all time, George Corley Wallace, really an interesting guy. He said, I forgive George Wallace. I have to forgive him, but I don't forget him, but I have to forgive him. And I feel that way about the people that have screwed over my career very badly in Hollywood. I have to forgive them. I don't forget them, but I have to forgive them.
You have to forgive them, but the problem is, if we don't do something about it, they'll continue to do it to other Ben Steins. They'll continue to do it to.
Happy to do something about it. What would you like me to do about it, Judah?
What we are doing, what we try to do, and what Rob does is speak about it, preach about it. That it's absolutely unacceptable. That BLM is a terrorist organization, and we as honest citizens in many ways can't condone the destruction they are bringing on this great country.
I don't condone it, Judah, and you and I've had this discussion ad infinitum.
I didn't say you were condoning it.
I don't. What? I'm sorry.
I didn't say you were condoning it.
You
asked, what can we do?
I don't condone it. but I say, I will fight them as hard as I can within the bounds of the law and common decency, but I forgive them. We have a saying in Alcoholics Anonymous, which both you and I are quite familiar with. Sometimes our enemies are spiritually sick people. Just as a matter of opinion, I think, for example, that Maxine Waters is one of the most spiritually sick people I have ever seen in the United States of America. But I forgive her. I will fight her as much as I can, but I forgive her.
Rob, final thoughts?
Well, I think for me, it's my girlfriend and I were having this conversation the other day. She said, "What do you want to do with the rest of your life?" And I said, I'm pretty happy with what I'm doing. There was a time where every day I woke up and thought, I got to be the best. I got to be great. I got to keep moving forward and being bigger and better. I'm pretty happy with what I do now. And if it ends here, it ends here. And I've said this on the air many times. I'm never not going to say what I think because of fear of losing a job or not being able to do this anymore. It's been a great ride. I've impacted a lot of people. I'm going to keep saying what I think and doing what I think and doing what I know is right. My ratings, knock on wood, are good because of that, because people like it. And I think more people have got to be willing to stand up and say, I'm willing to lose a job or some money or whatever for what I know is right and my own self-pride and my own self-dignity, and keep speaking out and standing up for themselves.
I now have to sing.
But I have to thank everybody that's been listening, and I want to remind everybody to please download our episodes. And thank you for being in the chat. Your chat is always helpful and always welcome. And we could disagree to disagree. We could agree to agree, and we could have discourse. It's what separates us from everybody else, and we learn here. The best part of what Rob said was tonight that we get the best lessons in the world on this show. I want to thank Rob Kendall. Tell everybody where they can find you.
93.1 WIBC, WIBC.com, 9 to noon Eastern, the Mock and Rob Show.
And thank you again. And you can find Ben Stein at spectator.org. Follow his daily diaries. And of course, you can find them on Parler at Ben Stein and Newsmax quite often, Newsmax TV and Newsmax the magazine. Ben, please take us out.
Oh, Lord, my God, when I in awesome wonder consider all the worlds thy hands have made, I hear the sound, I see the roaring thunder, thy power throughout the universe displayed. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art.
Thank you all for listening to Ben Stein, Hour of Power. We will see you here on Thursday night. Have a great night all. Thank you.
The hour of decision.